10. My sons were about 2 and 4 when their pet goldfish died. I attempted to use the situation as an opportunity to discuss death and mortality. After I finished my explanation, my 4-year looked up at me with his big blue eyes and asked, "Mommy, someday, will you die?" My heart filled with love and a little sadness, knowing this was one of those pivotal moments when the first bit of childhood innocence was lost, and I told him yes, someday, Mommy will die. "Good," he said with a totally deadpan expression, and walked out of the room. Later, when we were about to flush the fish, he asked if we could eat him instead. I said no, we don't eat pets because we love them, and he said, "When you die, I'm going to eat you." 9. While playing classroom with my 3-year-old brother, he made an offhanded comment about being in my mother's belly twice. I was amused and said, "Oh, really?" He proceeded to tell me in amazing detail being inside our mother. He told me about it being warm and that he liked it, but he always felt sick. One day he got so sick that they came and told him he had to leave. He didn't want to, so they promised him he would get to came back again and back to our mom. So he left, and they let him come back again, and this time he didn't feel sick. I lost my mind and started screaming for my mother. He told her the same story then. After she stopped crying, we were not allowed to talk about it. I was 10, and I was old enough to remember that she had a miscarriage almost 1 year before my brother was born. Side note, I'm not religious, but my brother always kind of makes me wonder. 8. My daughter was 4 years old. One morning I heard her door open and shut. That usually meant that she would be coming to our room to lay down with us. She never came in, but shortly after I heard her voice. Hoping she would go back to sleep, I let her be for a bit. Then I heard the door open and shut again. This time I decided to go into her room and see why she kept getting out of bed. I walked in, and she had her eyes closed. "Sweetie." "Yes, Daddy." "Why did you get out of bed?" "I didn't. I was trying to sleep, but he wouldn't leave me alone. He kept talking to me and asking me questions." "He? Who is he?" "The little boy that was in my room." Sweetie, that was just a dream. There's no boy in your room." "I know that. He just left." "Okay, well, what was the little boy doing?" "He was hanging from the fan and asking me a bunch of questions." "How was he hanging from the fan?" "With his arms." "No, with a rope." Scariest fucking moment of my life. I asked her about it about a year later, and she said she doesn't remember. 7. Not a parent myself, but still a good story. At one point I had to share a bed with my 5-year-old niece. Things were pretty normal for a while, and I was almost asleep. Then I feel it. A tiny hand stroking the back of my head, and fingers being run through my hair. I knew it was her because this was not the first time she'd done this. Kinda freaky. But then again, she had always been a weird kid who liked to touch other people to feel comforted. So, figuring she'd probably gotten scared somehow, I let her keep at it for a long time, thinking she would stop soon enough. But oh no. Then she started talking to me. She brushed my hair away from my ear, leaned in so that I could feel her breath on my cheek, and said, "Oh, don't worry, Auntie Jane. I won't kill you and make all your blood and guts come out." With that, she promptly stopped petting my hair, rolled over, and went to sleep, leaving me wide awake and pondering WTH just happened for the next 4 hours. 6. At Grandma's old farmhouse in Florida, 4-year-old granddaughter looked at the ceiling and asked, "Who's that?" Grandma replied, "Who is who, honey?" Daughter, "There's a witch on the ceiling looking at us." Grandma, "Well, is she a nice witch or a mean witch? Because mean witches aren't allowed in our house." Daughter, "Well, she's smiling, but not in a nice way." She proceeded to watch something on the ceiling track toward the basement door, then went back to her snack. Edit more context. This is a historic 1910s-ish farmhouse in Citrus, formerly cattle country. I was visiting with my kids, and separate from this, my daughter stopped at the start of the main hallway one day and asked me, pointing to the front door, "Daddy, who is that little boy?" Already freaked out by above, I asked what she meant, and she abruptly said, "Oh, never mind, he left." I'm not a big ghost believer, dude, but I definitely leave 4% of my brain power open to something I don't understand based on their focus, honest line of questioning, and apparent belief in whatever they were or were not seeing. It seemed to surpass the normal, I have an imaginary friend thinking. 5. I was driving my son to daycare. It was just the two of us, as I already dropped my other son off at school. My then 3-year-old said to me, "Mommy, I love you more than my first mommy." I said, "Your first mommy?" He said, "Yes, my first mommy in California. We live in the US, but about as far from California as you can get." I said, "You lived in California?" He said, "Yes, up until Jason stabbed me, and then I came to you." I said, "Who is Jason?" And then he just started talking about something else. I tried to get more info from him on it, but he never talked about it again. So weird, and I can't imagine where he would have gotten the fodder for it to make it up in his imagination. The only Jason we knew was someone he saw only occasionally, and my son liked him. There was no fear or bad feelings associated with him. The only media he saw at that point was various kids' TV. Still kind of freaks me out almost 10 years later. 4. My daughter has always had night terrors. Since she was only a couple of months old, the doctor said it was just gas, and that babies don't dream. But he didn't see the absolute look of terror night after night. Even after having changed her diet and eating habits as he suggested, he finally agreed. They have mostly subsided, but there was one in particular that I will never forget her telling us about. This is as close as I can remember to her exact wording and told from her perspective. I was with my family that I lived with before I lived you, and they were very, very mean people. My mom was dead because they didn't like her anymore, and my dad and brother hated me. They tied me to a chair in the basement, beat me, stuck things in me. I couldn't get clarification on this. How the fuck does a 4-year-old know about this kind of abuse? And never fed me. Sometimes I would get free and would have to eat dirt and bugs. They let their friends do stuff to me too. Me. What kind of stuff? Bad stuff, I can't say. It's hard to remember, but it was bad. Their friends later killed my bad dad and bad brother and stole me away. They chained me to their wall and threw knives at me and burned me with sticks from their fire. When they got tired of my crying, they held my throat until I died. Then they cut me up into little tiny pieces and put me in the blender. Then they found mommy and made her drink me. And that's how I was born. Me. Well, that's quite the sadistic dream, sweetheart. It wasn't a dream, Daddy. That's what really happened. Me. Good. God. 3. As someone else mentioned, kids are known for being in tune with the supernatural and being able to see things most adults cannot. I fully believe this theory. I don't have kids, but my parents remind me of this story quite often, and I'm still fascinated by it to this day. When I was around 2, I was with my parents visiting a family friend. We were standing in sort of a small living space with a rocking chair in the corner of the room. I started laughing, saying hi, and waving to the chair. My mom asked who I was talking to which I replied, "There's a woman in the chair." The chair slowly started rocking. Our family friend told my parents after this that her mother sat in that chair often and had recently passed away. This is just one of my A&E stories that I have, but I was so interested by this thread and wanted to share a memory of my own. 2. Not my kid, but my friends. They were across the country visiting family and out for a drive. Her 4-year-old points down an old, overgrown road, more of a dirt track, and said, "That was where I used to go to school." She told him he didn't even go to school yet. Mentioned it to her brother when they drove by another day, and he told her that well down that track used to be a schoolhouse in the 1800s. Same kid was on a walk with Mom in our town around a fairly wooded pond. He asked his mom if they could go another way. She said there was only path and asked why. He responded, "I don't like that man hanging from the tree." Needless to say, they moved away from that area very quickly. A few years ago, my daughter was 8 at the time. For some reason, I had fallen asleep in my son's room. Around 2:45 in the morning, she walked into the room and said, "Dad isn't breathing." My family is prone to sleepwalking, so I knew this was the case. I told her, "I'm just fine, baby. Go on back to bed." She said it again, "Dad isn't breathing." This point, I walked her back to her room, and she once again repeated it. I said again, "I'm fine, to go back to sleep." She said, "Dad went to heaven." But at this point, she seemed to go back to sleep and never said anything else. Went to work a few hours later. We get a phone call that one of my co-workers had passed in the night. At 2:45 a.m., when his daughter tried to wake him up. The girls were both good friends and had stayed the night together on several occasions. Enough so I considered him a good friend. My daughter woke up and was repeating the same thing that little girl was saying to her mom on the phone at the same time. My daughter has no recollection of this happening, and I've never told my co-worker's wife. My daughter and her are still good friends to this day, 3 years later. My daughter also hasn't slept-walked since that night. If you're craving more spine-chilling tales, join us for more haunting mysteries and horror stories. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications.